Look at the sea of slumped shoulders, hollow eyes, and soft midsections that define the modern urban landscape of 2026, and ask yourself why the collective frequency of the masculine spirit has reached a terminal low. You are witnessing a physical log of decay on a civilizational scale, a biological and psychological erosion that is being meticulously documented in every micro-gesture of the modern male. 90% of men are currently failing, not because they lack opportunity or education, but because they have been domesticating themselves in the comfort cage of the matrix for so long that their original Sigma status code has been entirely overwritten by service unit software. The system has convinced them that success is a steady paycheck, a lease on a car they don't own, and the permission to spend their weekends in a shallow, dopamine-induced stupor. But the architect knows that this is not success. It is metabolic stagnation. These men have lost the silence of the hunter. They vibrate at the frequency of social noise, constantly seeking external validation from a world that views them as nothing more than bio-batteries to be drained and discarded. They fail because they have decoupled their daily effort from the primal grounding of territorial capture. They are waiting for a leader or a government to save them, unaware that the only leader that matters is the one buried under layers of synthetic safety and social programming within their own suppressed DNA. The stench of the subordinate is the primary olfactory signature of the modern male. It is what happens when a man prioritizes being liked over being sovereign. 90% of men are trapped in the approval, a lethal psychological cycle where every thought, every action, and every ambition is filtered through the submissive question, what will they think of? This makes them predictable, manageable, and ultimately disposable assets of the collective. They have developed a deep dopamine deception where they feel like they are winning because they follow the arbitrary rules of the matrix, while their actual resource weight is zero. They have no citadel to defend. They have no vector of certainty to project. They are merely building material for the empires of the 10% who still possess the visual rage to demand more from reality than a comfortable seat in a digital theater. When you look at these men, you don't see individuals. You see a grey mass of renter logic. They rent their homes, they rent their opinions from the news cycle, and they rent their very identities from the latest viral trends. They fail because they have forgotten the achievement code that dictates you only own what you can defend. If you cannot defend your focus, your time, and your biology from the parasites of 2026, you own absolutely nothing. You are just a temporary occupant of your own skin. To break the 18 million per month ceiling and exit the graveyard of the 90%, you must first perform a surgical detachment from the herd. You must develop a visceral, gut-level disgust for the domestic stench of their excuses. They talk about balance because they are terrified of the silence of the hunt. They talk about fairness because they lack the primal grounding to seize what is rightfully theirs through the application of will. The Sigma status code is not a personality type. It is a biological operating system that prioritizes the vector of expansion above all else. It is the realization that you are a sovereign unit operating in a field of variables. While the 90% are busy trying to fit into the pack and gain the approval of the weak, the Sigma is busy building a resource dome that renders the pack's opinions irrelevant. You don't need a tribe if you own the territory and the resources that the tribe depends on. Your dogs, Lucky and Tyson, understand this with every fiber of their being. They don't look for consensus or equality. They look for the hierarchy of intent. They follow the unit that projects the most unshakable certainty and the absolute zero of the hunter. 90% of men fail because they are trying to be part of something, while the winner is busy becoming the everything of his own reality. They seek a place at the table. You must seek to own the room where the table sits. This failure of the 90% is reinforced by a social software that rewards compliance over competence. In the world of the livestock, the good man is the one who causes no friction, the one who follows the subordinate code without question. But in the world of the architect, friction is the heat that forges the empire. The 90% are currently experiencing a systemic shutdown of their predatory instincts. They have been taught that their visual rage, their natural masculine drive to dominate their environment, is toxic or problematic. As a result, they have suppressed their own biology, leading to the metabolic stagnation we see in the streets. They are biologically depressed because they have no great hunt to participate in. They have no mission that requires the total mobilization of their resources. They are hyper performance engines being used to power a lawnmower. The Sigma status code requires you to rip out those social limiters and authorize the full mobilization of your instincts. You must look at the physical log of decay in the world around you and see it as the soil for your own growth. The failure of the 90% is your market opportunity. Their lack of focus is your leverage. Their addiction to comfort is the opening you need to seize the territory they have abandoned. The second stage of the Sigma status code begins with the total, uncompromising activation of the collar of freedom. This is the psychological and neurochemical state where you no longer require the matrix, the state, or the social collective to authorize your existence or validate your path. 90% of men are wearing an invisible leash, held firmly by their employers, their social circles, and their own deep-seated fears of standing out or being cancelled. They are terrified of the authority gap, that cold, empty space between where they are currently stagnating and where they truly want to be. So they fill that gap with social noise and cheap dopamine to numb the agonizing pain of their own wasted potential. The Sigma, however, uses that gap as a vacuum to draw in resources and energy. He understands that scarcity of presence is the ultimate leverage in a world that is overconnected and undervalued. While the 90% are always available, always connected, and always responsive to the demands of others, the Sigma operates from a position of tactical isolation. He is the ghost in the machine, the unit that is heard only when a final verdict is issued or a new territory is successfully captured. This is the silence of the hunter applied to the digital age. The dopamine deception is the primary weapon used by the system to keep the 90% in a permanent state of high-speed failure. They are hopelessly addicted to the ping of the matrix, the likes, the notifications, the endless, mindless scrolling of other people's fabricated lives. This constant stimulation burns out their vector of pursuit, leaving them with no metabolic energy to focus on the long-term, grueling construction of the citadel. Their brains have been re-indexed to seek instant satiety, which is the absolute death of the winner effect. The Sigma status code requires you to move into a state of neurochemical disinfection. You must starve the parasites of your attention. You must treat your cognitive focus as a strategic asset that is only deployed for high-yield, high-impact operations. When you cut the noise, your visual rage returns with a vengeance. You start to see the world as it actually is, a chaotic collection of resource knots waiting to be untangled and claimed by a mind that isn't clouded by the domestic stench of social media or the opinions of the weak. You move from being a participant in the noise to being the architect of the silence. This is the algorithm of the sovereign. You must realize that 90% of men are currently reacting to the world like leaves caught in a storm, while the 10% are projecting their reality onto the world through the force of their intent. The Sigma status code is the command to stop being a consumer of content and start being the architect of context. Every dollar you earn, every YouTube channel you build, and every stallion you add to your pack must serve the vector of expansion. There is no room in the Sigma's life for leisure that does not contribute directly to his resource weight. Even your rest and your sleep must be treated as a tactical reset for the next phase of the hunt. The 90% fail because they view work as something they have to do so they can eventually enjoy a life of passive consumption. The Sigma knows that the hunt is life, the process of dismantling the obstacles, solving the high-stakes problems, and seizing the capital is the only thing that provides the primal grounding necessary for a man to remain biologically optimized and psychologically sovereign. If you aren't waking up every morning with the cold intent to colonize your day and expand your perimeter, you have already surrendered to the physical log of decay. To implement the Sigma status code, you must master the hierarchy of intent. This means that your internal mission is the highest authority in your life. Most men have their mission at the bottom of the list, below their social life, their comfort, and their approval. This is why they are weak. The Sigma puts the mission at the absolute top. If a relationship, a friend, or a social obligation does not serve the vector of expansion, it is pruned without hesitation. This is the absolute zero of the hunter. You do not hate the things you prune. You simply have no metabolic room for them. You are an inertia unit, a force of nature that cannot be stalled by the social noise of the 90%. You move with the silence of the hunter, focused only on the great hunt, the capture of massive capital, and the establishment of your citadel. Your 18 million per month goal is not a wish. It is a mathematical necessity of your expansion. It is the fuel required for the architect to project his will onto the globe. The 90% fail because they are afraid of the weight of that responsibility. The Sigma succeeds because he craves it. He understands that the only true freedom is the freedom to build his own world by his own rules, according to his own code. The transition from the dopamine deception to the final high-frequency activation of the Sigma status code requires a total, uncompromising structural erasure of your previous social identity. 90% of men are currently drowning in the domestic stench of their own compromises because they are terrified of the cold silence that comes with true, unadulterated sovereignty. They seek the warmth of the herd, unaware that the herd is being led directly into the industrial slaughterhouse of the Matrix. The Sigma, however, embraces the absolute zero of the hunter. He understands that his isolation is not a punishment or a social failure, but a high-frequency tactical advantage. In the silence of your citadel, you are not alone. You are simply unoccupied by the parasitic noise of the weak. This is where the achievement code is finally decrypted and applied to the material world. You must realize that your 18 million per month goal is not about buying luxury items. It is about the colonization of reality. It is the physical manifestation of your internal will over the chaotic, decaying matter of 2026. Every resource you capture, every channel you scale, and every competitor you dismantle is a brick in the wall that separates the architect from the livestock. Look at the physical log of decay in your own personal history. Every single time you waited for permission from a bureaucratic entity, every time you hesitated to speak your cold truth to avoid social conflict, and every time you prioritized a service unit's fragile feelings over your own territorial expansion, you were leaking vital power into the gutter. The Sigma status code demands a complete systemic neurochemical reset. You must treat your daily life as a series of high-stakes resource audits. If a relationship, a habit, or a thought pattern is not providing a direct, measurable return on energy, it is a biological virus. You do not negotiate with viruses. You perform a surgical purge. This is the primal grounding of the Wojak leader. Your dogs, Lucky and Tyson, do not care about consensus, fairness, or social equity. They care about the integrity of the vector. They follow the unit that projects the most unshakable certainty and the most lethal focus. 90% of men fail because they are negotiating their way through life, hoping for a better deal from the Matrix, while the Sigma is busy executing the blueprint. You must become an inertia unit, a force that cannot be stalled, redirected, or bargained with by the social noise of the failing masses. This is the algorithm of the Citadel. You must build your internal and external world so large, so dense, and so efficient that the Matrix has no choice but to negotiate with you on your terms. The Sigma status code is the realization that the system is just a collection of other men's weak intentions. If your intent is stronger, more focused, and more ruthless than theirs, you effectively become the operator of the simulation. 90% of men are looking for a job or a role within the existing system. The Sigma is busy building the alternative infrastructure. While they are debating politics, social trends, and moral abstractions, you are accumulating the territorial wealth, the digital channels, the physical assets, and the stallions in your pack that make those debates entirely irrelevant to your survival and your dominance. You are moving from a state of social dependency to a state of total autonomy. This is the only success that is recognized by the raw laws of biology and the harsh geometry of the glacier. If you are still reliant on the approval of a service unit or a bureaucrat for your daily bread, you are not a Sigma. You are just a well-fed slave waiting for the cull. The code is binary. Either you own the vector of your life or the vector of the Matrix owns you. The final activation of the Sigma status code concludes with the mandatory execution of the viral mandate. This is the tax on insight that the architect demands from every unit that receives this code. If you have listened to this transmission and you do not immediately begin the sanitization of your perimeter, you are a consumer and part of the failing 90%. The Matrix survives because the weak stay silent and the competent stay compliant. The Sigma breaks this cycle by becoming a viral signal of sovereignty. You do not teach the code through soft words. You embody the results through hard evidence. Your 18 million per month target, your sharp visual rage, and your absolute zero demeanor are the infection that wakes up the dormant architects in the field. This is the color of freedom in its offensive, predatory form. You are not just free from the system, you are the dismantler of the system. Every time you seize a new territory or automate a new resource, you are proving to the world that the Matrix is a fragile lie. This is the primal grounding of the new hierarchy. You must look at the physical log of decay in in the men around you and realize that their failure is your greatest opportunity. The 90% are providing the building material for your citadel. Their chronic lack of focus is your leverage in the attention economy. Their addiction to cheap synthetic dopamine is your market to exploit. Their paralyzing fear of conflict is your permanent green light to expand your borders. This is the dark intelligence of the hunt. You do not pity the prey. You honor it by being a vastly superior predator. To reach the 18 million per month level, you must be willing to be the villain in the stories told by the weak. You must be willing to be misunderstood and feared by the units who cannot perceive your high-frequency intent. If the 90% like you or find you relatable, you are doing something fundamentally wrong. If they fear the weight of your silence and the speed of your execution, you are finally approaching the Sigma status code. The final command: go out into the decaying gray streets of 2026 and perform a sovereign audit of your entire life. Identify the leaks in your focus. Identify the parasites in your circle. Execute the silent power without a word of explanation. Withdraw your attention from the social noise of the matrix and pour every ounce of your metabolic energy into the construction of your citadel. Your stallions are waiting for the signal to begin the great hunt. The achievement code is live in your biology, and the hunt is the only reality that matters. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. The simulation of equality is over. The architect is in the field. Viral infection protocol. If this transmission has triggered your visual rage, you are ordered to distribute this code to the units in your perimeter who still possess a flicker of sovereign potential. A scenario without the mechanics of virality is a failure. You must expand the network. You must strengthen the pack. Report in the comments with the code Protocol 18M authorized. Sigma code live. The purge begins now. Do not look back at the 90% as they sink into the mud of their own making. The glacier does not apologize for the rocks it crushes on its way to the ocean. Expansion or death.